Hello and welcome to this special Memorial Day edition of FS Mania. We're here today in Juneau, Alaska, and you may be wondering why a P-51 Mustang video is opening with a shot of A2A's Piper J3 Cub. Question: have you ever said to, say, your significant other, "Hey, I'm going to go out and buy a new cordless phone because the battery's dead on this old thing," only to come back a couple hours later with a mega big screen TV? I mean, who among us hasn't done that, right? Well, I went over to A2A Simulations to check out this Cub for bush and float plane flying here in Alaska, and while I was there, this pretty girl caught my eye, so I ended up buying both the Cub and the P51 Mustang. As soon as I started flying the Mustang, I knew I was in for a special treat and a real challenge. This is North American Aviation's P51 Mustang. She is a long-range, single-seat fighter and fighter bomber used during World War II, the Korean War, and other conflicts. The Mustang was designed and built by North American Aviation at the request of the British Purchasing Commission. The prototype was rolled out in September 1940, a mere 102 days after the contract was signed. The Mustang was originally designed to use an Allison engine, which had limited high-altitude performance. The addition of the Rolls-Royce Merlin V12 engine transformed the Mustang's performance at altitudes above 15,000 feet, matching or bettering that of the Luftwaffe. The definitive version, the P51-D, which is the model we have here, is powered by the Packard V1650-7, a licensed-built version of the Rolls-Royce Merlin 60 series, two-stage, two-speed supercharged engine, and armed with 6 50 caliber M2 Browning machine guns. She is a single seat, has a crew of 1, is 32 feet 3 inches long, has a wingspan of 37 feet, a height of 13 feet 4 inches. She has a laminar wing airfoil. These airfoils generated very low drag at high speeds. She has a maximum takeoff weight of 12,100 pounds. The single Rolls-Royce Merlin is a liquid-cooled, supercharged 60-degree V12 piston engine that will deliver 1,490 horsepower at 3,000 RPMs and 1,720 horsepower at WEP, which stands for War Emergency Power. An interesting side note on the Merlin engine: there were talks with Henry Ford's son Edsel of the Ford Motor Company to manufacture 6,000 of the Merlins for the British and another 3,000 for the U.S., for a total of a $130 million deal. Henry Ford, however, declared he was only willing to manufacture engines for the U.S., so the deal was ultimately made with the Packard Motor Company. The Mustang has a maximum speed of 437 miles per hour at 25,000 feet, a cruise speed of 362 miles per hour, a range of 1,650 miles with external tanks, and a service ceiling of 41,900 feet. She will climb at 3,200 feet per minute, which is actually less than the 4,000 feet per minute the Turbine Duke will deliver. However, the Turbine Duke will not fly 362 miles per hour, nor can she shoot anybody out of the sky. So with that, climb aboard, buckle up, and let's take this old girl flying. Our flight today will be a short VFR hop over to Yakutat, Alaska, located at the mouth of Yakutat Bay, an isolated location in lowlands along the Gulf of Alaska, 173 nautical miles northwest of Juneau. Our route of flight will take us over Glacier National Park with mountains topping out over 15,000 feet. You may notice that our flight is in a northwesterly direction. However, our magnetic heading that we're going to steer is 276 degrees. That is due to the magnetic declination. If you notice this line up here on the VFR chart, it's telling us 22 degrees east, which is the magnetic declination in this area. The closer we get to the poles, the more that gets. So even though our true course is something like 298 degrees, our magnetic course will steer is 276 degrees, and I'm actually going to steer 270 degrees to bring me just a little bit south of the airport so that I can fly straight in, approach into runway 29 there in Yakutat. And you can see there's Yakutat Bay, and there's glaciers all and mountains off to the right and the Gulf of Alaska off to the left. Yakutat Airport origins date from 1940. when Yakutat Army Airfield was constructed as part of the United States Army's long-range defense program for Alaska. During World War II, the airfield was a key U.S. Army Air Force base, making it a somewhat appropriate destination for our P-51 flight today. All right, welcome aboard the P-51, and this is one sweet little airplane, as I have said, and will probably say again. I know it looks a lot different than what you're used to flying with me. We always have, seems like, the latest whiz-bang technology, but with this bird, we've got everything we need, and we'll do a real quick little cockpit familiarization and get her fired up, and let's fly over to Yakutat. You can see we have a rear gauge there for our fuel tank. It's on empty. We don't have any fuel in it. And there's a little armrest over here for long flights. We can keep our hand over there on the throttle. Flaps are over here. They're in the up position. And this is our carburetor ram air control. And let me get over here where I can turn and pull it up. There we are. And carb heat, both in the on position. Sometimes you'll get a little icing in this airplane. You start losing manifold pressure and you need to apply carb heat. And these are our flaps for our radiator and oil coolers. They're up in auto position. I'm going to leave them there. And for takeoff, rudder trim, we want to put about 6 degrees right rudder in there for rudder trim. Aileron trim we'll leave at 0, and our nose we want to trim that about 2 degrees up. And our mixture is in idle cutoff. We'll leave it there. We want to crack our throttle open about 1 inch or so, and prop lever right over here in full forward position. And let's see, let's go ahead and cut on our battery and our generator, the on position. And before we cut on our fuel booster, we just want to be sure gun control and safeties are in the off position. Our ignition's over here in the off position, and our gear lever is down here. It's indicating green light, indicates down. And fuel gauges are down here on the floor. You can see we have about 50% fuel. I'm going to go ahead and cut on our defroster. We'll be needing that. We're going to cruise at 20,000 feet. When we descend, we don't want to frost up too bad. And a little bit of heat, and here's fresh air over here on the right. And let's move in here a little bit closer at this panel. And just looking, there's our directional gyro, airspeed indicator, our altimeter, and we can set that on the altimeter setting, which is about 30.07 and indicating about 20 feet. And vertical speed indicator, there's an accelerometer there, acceleration unit that indicates G-forces. And our coolant temperature, our carb air temperature, suction gauge, clock. And this is a direction finder, which doesn't really work with any of the radios that we have, at least not in this model. So we're basically going to be doing dead reckoning today, and we'll see how that goes. So this is part of the gun sights over here, and our tachometer for our props, speed, manifold pressure gauge for our power settings, oxygen indication, and cylinder pressure over here, and then our temperatures for our oil and fuel pressure right here in this gauge. We've got oil pressure, oil temperature, and fuel pressure all right there, so it's an important gauge. And looking over here, you can see we have switches. We've cut on our batteries and our lights, and so they're all on. And then our radios are over here, and this one would be for your ADF, so it's the lower frequency, and these are the higher frequency VHF frequencies. You can set those up and use them if you want. We're not going to use them on this flight. So let's go ahead and get everything going here. So we want to, first thing we want to do is listen out. And we should hear our fuel pump, and I do. And so we want to give it some primer, and what we're going to do is give it about 4 seconds. 2, 3, 4, and that should about do it. And we're going to clear our prop, We're going to turn our starter over. We're going to count about 6 blades here, and then we're going to switch our ignition on and then add some fuel. So let's start it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Ignition. And let's mixture rich. And oil pressure is coming up, and you'll notice it's going to come up pretty high here because our engine's cold right now and the oil's thicker. It'll be a little bit higher pressure, and so we're going to want that to warm up a little bit before we give any much power here. Otherwise we'll get too high of a pressure in there and blow a gasket, create leaks. So it's idling good right here. I think we'll just leave it there for a moment and let it idle. And let's go ahead and get on our lights, tail lights and wing lights and pitot heat. Go ahead and cut on our landing light. I'm just going to let her warm up here for just a second. And I'll maybe do a fun fact while we're waiting for it to warm up. P51. What does the P stand for? Pursuit. So the designation indicates it's a pursuit aircraft. There's a fun fact. Here's one other fun fact. There were 15,586 P51s built, and at a rate of a cost during 1942 of $51,000. That's about $800 million worth of airplanes. $51,000 in 1942, that sounds like a deal, but in today's dollars, with inflation of about 3.79% annual, that's about 1,415% inflation, and that's about $772,000 in 2015 dollars. So still a good deal, but a P-51 today, even if it's only partially restored, will cost you at least a cool $1 million. So they were good investments, and after the war, interestingly, they sold them as surplus for somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,500. So yeah, a fun fact. Okay, so I see our oil pressure's coming down, our temperature's coming up. We don't want to hang around on the ground too awful long here, so we're going to go ahead. We've got our taxi light on, release our brake, and let's get out of here. I'm going to push our stick forward and give ourselves just a little bit of power and just some right rudder, and I'm going to use our differential braking to get us turned away from those fuel trucks. And we'll go back the other way. So it's a little tricky to learn to taxi this airplane, but once you get the hang of it, differential brakes help. And I'd actually use my X55, keeping that stick forward, letting that tail wheel caster, did I say nose wheel? It's tail wheel. Let that caster actually is, to me, the easier way. If you pull the stick aft, the tail wheel in theory locks in place and has about 6 or 7 degrees of movement, but I have found that keeping the stick forward and letting it caster and taxiing in these tight areas especially, I have a little better control, and using rudder, of course, with the differential brakes. The only thing that can really mess you up in an airplane like this that uses differential brake for steering is if you ever lose a brake, it's going to be really hard to taxi and to stop. Basically what will happen is you'll turn in circles or tail loop. So once we get kind of on the taxiway, we can back us power back down to about 1,000 RPMs. And you can do some S-turns. As you can see, it's hard to see. So you can do S-turns. You can also look out of the side like this. I saw an airplane taxiing down here earlier, but I don't see him now. I better do an S-turn here and make sure he's not in front of me somewhere. That'd be embarrassing. Oh, there he is at the end of the runway. Okay. So he should be gone before we get there. A2A did an awesome job with this airplane. Excellent job. Very, very well modeled and detailed, and I believe very accurate, and which also with that comes very challenging. This is a very tricky airplane to fly. It requires a lot of practice. We'll say that. A ton of practice. It's not one you're going to get in and master it on the first 2 or 3 times you fly it. And there goes the Air Alaska airplane, jet 737. Beautiful day here in Alaska, late in the day. I'll just pause right here. We'll run up our engine, check our mags. We'll leave that canopy open so we don't fog up in here. If you close the canopy and sit in here too long, it will definitely fog up. So I'm just going to bring the engine up to, let's set the brake. There we go. I'm going to bring the engine up to 2,000 RPMs. And we'll check our mags. First our left. We don't want any more than about a 50 RPM drop. And now the right mag. Oh, too far. And back to both. And let's exercise our prop. Governor. Get some hot oil flowing through that. And we're looking at all our gauges. Everything looks good. Oil pressure's still a little bit high as it's warming up. And actually you're not supposed to run it up until you get above 50 degrees centigrade, if I remember correctly. And everything looks good. All the gauges, we got suction. We'll bring her back down. Okay, let's close our canopy now. There we go. Now a little bit quieter. That big 12-cylinder Merlin makes some racket. So we're going to start off on our left tank. And once we get up to our cruise altitude, we'll switch over to the right. The brakes released. Looking for traffic. Pretty much ignoring air traffic control today. Kind of king of the skies when I'm flying the P-51. And if anybody gets in my way, I'll just shoot them down. I really wouldn't do that. I'm only kidding, you know. So taking off is pretty much just about as hard as landing, if not harder, to do it smoothly. I'm not going to say I've mastered that, but hopefully I will keep it on the runway. Here comes some more traffic. So what we're going to do is hold our brakes and bring our power on up to about, no flaps on the takeoff, by the way, and do a final check, be sure I haven't missed anything. I've got our trim set, everything's auto over here, these are up. Yep, I think we're all right. So we're going to bring our power up to about 20 inches on the manifold pressure gauge off to the right. A little bit of back pressure on the stick, theoretically locking the tail wheel. And as we start to roll, I'm going to ease that power on in. Come up to about 55 inches. Ease off that back pressure on the stick. Feeding in some right rudder. At 5,500 RPMs, the tail's coming up. And a little bit of right aileron when we pull the nose up to compensate for the torque from the engine. Get our gear up. And we'll bring our power back to 45 inches. And our prop comes back to 2,700 RPMs. And there's 500 feet. We'll go ahead and turn to our heading, which we're actually on pretty much. 270 is the heading we want to fly, so we're just going to climb out of here. So I'm just trimming the nose right now, setting us up about a 2,000 foot a minute climb, somewhere along in there. And it takes a little bit of getting used to this type of directional gyro. If you're used to the circular one, you basically steer towards the numbers on those that you want. And here, if I want 2.7, I need to steer the opposite way. So it's a little bit like reverse sensing. So we're just going to try to hold that 270 heading. We're flying pretty much straight into the sun, you can see. So we can use that for an outside reference. And we'll just monitor our instruments here. Make sure we're staying in the red. I can see our oil temperature is running pretty hot. And one way to help that is to get a little bit more airspeed. So I'm going to trim our nose down and pick up some speed, get a little bit more air flowing through there. And the other thing we can do is reduce our RPMs just a little bit more. Going the wrong way there. Glide. That'll help cool it down some as well. Now I can hear the flaps operating. They're thermostatically controlled. So there we go. We're indicating about 200 knots, climbing through almost up to 6,000 feet. We're going to flight level 200. One thing we do not want to forget to do, and that is put on an oxygen mask. Otherwise we will experience the effects of hypoxia, and we will pass out and not regain consciousness until we get back down to breathable air. I hate it when that happens. Yes, it happened to me once. I was flying formation with myself in another airplane and forgot to put my oxygen mask on. I was so concentrating on flying formation that all of a sudden I heard heavy breathing, and next thing I know, everything went dim. Yeah, it can happen. So we're just holding our heading. We've got our airspeed up now to 250 miles per hour indicated. I don't know if I've said knots yet, but this is in miles per hour. So I stand corrected. And a knot is 1.15 miles per hour, so about 15% more. So we could go a little faster if we wanted to and not break the below 10,000 foot 250 knot speed limit. We may do that before this flight's over with. And I'm going to get up, when we get up to altitude and get leveled off, we're going to do some fun stuff up there. In my opinion, fun stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and take that right rudder out. I feel the airplane wanting to. I'm going to take some of it out anyway. Take a little bit out because it's keep wanting to turn right on me. So this airplane, you just pretty much have to give it what it wants, and it'll let you know what it wants. And that's the Lynn Canal there that we're passing over, and up ahead is Glacier Bay. We're going to be flying over the Glacier National Park here in just a few minutes on our way to Yakutat. And my hope and my prayer is when we get to Yakutat that we can make a fair landing. I don't know that I've yet to make a great landing in this airplane, or even what I might consider a good landing. There's been a few that it's even be questionable whether I'd walk away or not. I've got one dinged up, bent up prop definitely where I nosed over. So yeah, we're at 12,000 feet. I'd say it's a good time to put on our oxygen mask. So to do that, we're going to shift 3, come up here and click oxygen mask. And you can see the blinker down here will indicate now that you've got oxygen flowing. We've got a full tank, so we're now good to go. Coming through 12.5. So the rule is between 12.5 and 15,000, you got 30 minutes according to FAA regulations without oxygen. And above 15,000 feet, you must have oxygen, supplemental oxygen. So basically no autopilot here. We just have to keep our eyes on the gauges and fly the airplane. If you get distracted very long in this airplane, you'll find yourself topsy-turvy easily. Starting to see a few of the ice fields that form into glaciers up here. Hopefully the cloud cover will let us see a few of those. So my right wing is still wanting to dip, and I'm on my left tank. So one thing that can cause that is fuel imbalance. You can see we've got more in the right, so I'm going to go ahead and cut us over to the right tank. If I can get us there. There we are. That'll help. And we can take out the rest of that rudder, right rudder. That'll help. And then we got to turn left to get back over to 270. Coming through 15.5. And our oil temperature looks good. Coolant temperature looks good. Fuel pressure is good. And I'm sorry, that is not coolant temperature, that's oil temperature. Oil pressure, oil temperature, and coolant temperature up here. And this is carb temperature, carb air temperature right here. And so in theory, if it gets to a certain point, we know to apply carb heat. And piston airplanes I have flown, so we just got pretty far off our heading there while I was looking at gauges, and that's how quick it happens. We'll just make a little bit of a right turn to get back over here on it.